Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Pod Theory. I'm your host, Jason Cercone, and today is our first installment of Pod Theory Q&A. That's right, once a week, I'm going to take questions from you, the audience, and I'm going to feature them here on the show and talk about them live. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do so by hitting me up via text at 412-965-8428. You can also find me on Twitter at Jason Cercone, or you can email your question to jason@jasoncercone.com, and I will get it featured on a future episode of Pod Theory. Our first question comes from Jason, not me, another Jason. And the question Jason asks is, can a podcast fail by trying too hard to grow too quickly? I think that's a great question, Jason, and it's a great way to get this segment kicked off. If you go back in the archives, and it's funny, today is the 100th episode of Pod Theory. If you go back and listen to any of the previous 99 episodes, just about all of them at some point in the show talks about the fact that you have to have a plan in place when you launch your podcast. That's something that I feel a lot of podcasters and a lot of creators don't take into consideration. They have a great idea for a show, and they just buy equipment and turn the mics on and they start to roll. And if they don't have a plan in place, eventually all that fresh content and all these wonderful ideas that are right at the front of your mind eventually will either fade away, or you'll cover them on your show, and then you're left scrambling with what to do next. And when you reach that point, it starts to get a little muddy in the water, and you start to get a little less enthused about your podcast. And it stops being a fun hobby and starts to be more of a chore. And that's typically when podcasts fade away. So if you try to just run out of the gates as fast as you can to get your show out there, chances are you're going to fail because you're trying to grow too fast. Another way to look at this is if you've got your podcast off the ground and you have a plan in place, but you're too focused on your numbers and you're trying to grow everything too fast, that can lead to failure as well. Because if you get sucked in by the numbers that are in front of you, they may be good, they may be great, they may be less than what you expected, but you have to think of podcasting as a long-term game. This is something that's going to take time to build. Even if you bring an established audience to your podcast with you, something that you may have built through email or through social media, whatever platform you've used before to build your audience, more than likely, they're going to gravitate to your show. But even then, to build upon that audience, it takes time. So if you start doing things too quickly, as Jason asked in his question, then you're not going to make it, because eventually you're going to run out of gas. It happens to all of us. If you run as fast as you can for as long as you can, eventually you just peter out and you fall over. And that's the last thing I want to see happen with anybody's podcast. So think of podcasting as a long-term content strategy, and it's something that you have to be patient with. I know I've mentioned this on past episodes too, and it's something that I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk say millions of times, is that we are impatient people. We want results immediately. And when those results don't come, we move on to the next thing. And then we try to get immediate results from that. And then when they don't come, we move on to the next thing, and so on and so on. Never realizing there is no such thing as immediate results. You have to work for those results. You need to do all of the important things that are going to help grow your podcast, and you can't do all of those things overnight. It just doesn't work that way. So think of podcasting as your long-term strategy, and understand that yes, if you try to grow too quickly, more than likely, your show is not going to make it. So be patient, be deliberate, and do the right things to make your show grow. Jason, thank you very much for the question. Again, if you would like to submit a question that I can talk about here on Pod Theory, you can hit me up on text at 412-965-8428. You can find me on Twitter at Jason Cercone, or you can email me, jason@jasoncercone.com. That's going to do it for episode 100 and our first installment of Pod Theory Q&A. I hope to hear from you with a question so I can bring it to the next Q&A episode. Good talk. I'll see you back here next time. This has been Jason Cercone on Pod Theory.